Fearful avoidants can be some of the most difficult exes to deal with because of all their hangups around romantic attachment. They find it very hard to build and maintain relationships because they struggle with intimacy and connection. They will be able to muddle through and build a happy life with somebody with a little self-awareness and some trial and error. But dealing with breakups is another matter entirely, because breaking up will trigger a fearful avoidance issues, and it'll make them act out in ways that will put strain on what's left of the relationship. Now, they may tell you that they need space or that they don't feel the same anymore, but beneath the surface, a complex psychological pattern is at play. And if you're wondering why your fearful avoidant ex doesn't want you anymore, it's really important to understand the roots of their behavior, the fear that they carry, and what you can potentially do to change their mind, at least if that's what you want. Attachment style is one of the best predictors of behavior following a breakup. That is, if you know your ex's attachment style, you can predict how they're going to treat you and react to you when you reach out. Now, fearful avoidant can be the most problematic attachment style because of how it interferes with intimacy. So let's talk a little bit about why this is. First off, we need to understand what we mean when we talk about avoidance as it relates to attachment style. So basically, an avoidant uses avoidance as a strategy to cope with uncertainty around the relationship. And this avoidance is triggered by moments of connection and disconnection. So maybe they move in with a partner and suddenly start to pull away emotionally. Maybe they have a fight and walk out instead of actually discussing the issue. Or maybe their partner comes to them with a complaint and they change the subject instead of opening up and trying to find common ground. There are so many ways that avoidance can manifest in a relationship, but if you've dated an avoidant, then you know what I'm talking about. They struggle to connect emotionally because they default to pulling away and taking space rather than coming together. Now, a fearful avoidant is even more specific. Not only does the fearful avoidant use the same strategies of avoidance, but they're driven by feelings of inadequacy and fear of rejection. These feelings will also cause them to be clingy and unpredictable to their partners. So they'll swing back and forth between pulling away and clinging to their partners. They feel like their partners are going to reject them, so they'll keep them at arm's length. But they also fear leaving their partner alone in case they do reject them. Now, a fearful avoidant person can be very hot and cold. They'll be intensely loving one minute and cold or distant the next. And when they feel threatened, they retreat. Not because they don't care, but because their coping mechanism is just to shut down emotionally. For them, vulnerability feels dangerous, but so does being alone. So then, why does this attachment style push your ex away from you after the breakup? Well, number one, they're trying to avoid their feelings by avoiding you. So one of the hallmarks of fearful avoidance is that they don't have the coping skills to actually deal with their emotions. And a breakup is one of the most emotionally charged situations that you can be in. Guilt, shame, regret, relief, anger, sadness. It's all coming up, and your fearful avoidant ex is doing all they can to reject and avoid those feelings. And they think that if they can stay away from you, they can keep these feelings at bay. Now, even if this isn't actually an effective strategy, it does make a certain amount of sense. They feel guilty for how they treated you. Seeing you reminds them of what they did, which makes them feel more guilty, and so they avoid seeing you to avoid this feeling. This reminds me of a question that I get pretty often from my clients. They say, my ex is dodging me, and they say it's because they're ashamed, but I forgave them, so why do they still feel this way? It's because this shame is self-inflicted. Even if you forgive them, they still feel this shame, and it's driving their behavior. In fact, sometimes your forgiveness makes them feel worse because it just puts a finer point on the idea that you're a good person and they're not, in their mind at least. And number two, they fear being trapped. Since your ex is avoidant, we know that they probably have a pretty strong fear of being pinned down. Being in a relationship makes them feel trapped, and they rebel against this by avoiding or even ending the relationship. So even though they care about you deeply, they feel like they bit off more than they could chew by getting so enmeshed in your life. It requires a level of consistency and vulnerability that they find difficult to maintain. Now, you might not see it this way, but I can pretty much guarantee that this fear was one of the primary drivers of the breakup in the first place. Whether they ended things because they wanted space or pushed you away and sabotaged the relationship until you ended things, it's all happening for the same reason. Your ex can't handle commitment because they can't handle closeness. And number three, they're self-sabotaging. So fearful avoidants are prone to self-sabotage. This is because they're so conflicted by the push and pull of intimacy. They may reach out to you only to pull back because they're fighting this internal battle. So every time they don't show up to see you or they fail to text back, it's usually not an accident. It's the weakest part of them triumphing over the strongest. The part of them that actually does want to try again. And fourth, they can't trust their own emotions. As I've said, having this attachment style causes internal conflict. And if we're in conflict with ourselves for long enough, we can no longer trust our own thoughts and feelings. So your ex is probably struggling to understand how they're feeling, and they don't want you to suffer because of their confusion and indecision. And that's why your ex's distance can actually be a sign of care for you. They feel like they're an emotional burden, and they don't want to saddle you with that, so they stay away. But, I'm sure this isn't a lot of comfort for you right now. So I know that this is a lot, but don't get overwhelmed by all of your ex's emotions here. Just take comfort in the idea that your ex's silence is more about them than it is about you. But that doesn't mean that you can't have an impact on what happens next. If you really want them back, then I'm going to present a path forward that can get you that second chance. And the first thing you need to do is understand and accept your ex's attachment style, because you can't get them back while simultaneously trying to change them. You need to understand that this is caused by intense trauma during their childhood. It changed how they fundamentally relate to people. Now, when you do reconnect and start dating again, they'll probably settle down a little and treat you better. But for now, you're going to have to accept some amount of mixed signals and hot and cold behavior. Now, this doesn't mean that you should let them do whatever they want and bend over backwards to placate them. It just means don't expect miracles here. You need to be able to accept them for who they are. And that's going to mean doing everything you can to protect yourself from their confusing behavior. So prioritize your own mental health and start to develop coping strategies of your own. Because if your ex doesn't text you back and it leads you to melt down for a few days and miss out on your own life, then this process is going to be way harder than it has to be. I like to tell my clients to learn to cope ahead. So say that you and your ex, just hooked up for the first time since the breakup. Imagine, they now disappear for a few days. They respond with one-word answers or not at all. Suddenly you go from feeling close for the first time in weeks to feeling further away from them than ever. Now, I know this hurts, but what do you do next? Do you eat a pint of ice cream and cry into your pillow? Or do you call a friend, go for a hike, read a book, maybe hit the gym? And this choice can make all the difference here. And making the right choice will help you get your ex back as well. Because when you're racked with emotional pain, you're not making your best choices. Even watching this video, which I would say is a great choice, I'm guessing you wouldn't have done at your absolute worst. Because when you're at your lowest, you're not actually making choices to get out of your despair, you're sinking deeper into it. This doesn't mean giving up. It means you can't go to them to solve your feelings of sadness, or you'll only push them further away. So what you need to do is accept the breakup and give them lots of space to sort out their feelings for you without feeling pressured. And this is actually going to work wonders for your chances with your ex, because they're driven to this back and forth behavior as they feel so much pressure from you and from themselves. So when they are suddenly left alone, they're going to feel the brunt of their loneliness and realize how lonely they are without you. In fact, they'll see that they miss you desperately and they need you in their life. And this is the epiphany that's going to lead them to come back to you in a lot of cases. All you have to do is be strong and maintain your distance for a little while. And by doing this, you're showing emotional maturity. You see, people with fearful avoidant attachment may feel mature, but they're actually quite immature when it comes to relationships, and it's something that they want very badly. So when they see you being strong and non-reactive, they'll be naturally drawn to you. Now, the best way to achieve this is to be firm with your boundaries, avoid drama and fighting, and don't get upset or react negatively if they start to pull away. This shows them that you have a strong sense of self and you're not bothered by their actions, which goes a long way to taking the pressure off of them. Another thing you can do is seek outside help. If you go to breakupbrad.com/coaching, you can sign up for my very affordable one-on-one coaching. I've helped tens of thousands win back their exes, and I can help you as well. Again, to learn more, see my availability, and sign up today, go to breakupbrad.com/coaching. Now remember, winning your ex back takes time. It's not something that you can ever rush if you want to have the optimal result, which is a second chance to create a life together. Now, I hope that I've shown you that while fearful avoidance can be really complicated and difficult to navigate, it is possible to create a happy relationship despite it if you're able to overcome the challenges it presents. And that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, liking, subscribing, and leaving your comments below. I read and respond to as many of them as I can. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.